What does equality mean to you? A study was conducted to examine fairness, but from a monkey's perspective. 2 monkeys would each give the researcher a rock, and they would each receive a cucumber. The monkeys were completely satisfied when they both received a cucumber, but knowing that monkeys prefer grapes, the researcher gave one monkey a grape while the other still got a cucumber. And here you can see how that monkey responded when confronted with the inequality created between them. This suggests that aversion to inequality is deeply rooted in biology. I'm Sierra, and I'm here today to talk about inequality in its many forms. Now I know what you must be thinking. What does a middle-class white girl know about inequality? Well, I grew up right outside of San Francisco, a place that exemplifies inequality in the United States. Every Christmas, my father and I would go into the city to deliver meals to people in disadvantaged neighborhoods. I'll never forget the first memory I have as a 9-year-old girl knocking on the door of someone's dirt-covered, run-down boarding home to deliver my first meal. A man cracked open the door as foul odors and cigarette smoke bursted out of his room. I handed him the meal and stood wide-eyed as the smoke began to clear to reveal his tiny dark room with no windows, no plumbing, and no ventilation. I was shocked to see someone living in such harsh conditions, but I tried to ignore the problem. And like many people, I convinced myself that he ended up there because he didn't work that hard or he didn't try hard enough in school. I mean, we all have equal opportunity in America, right? Last Christmas, I returned to that same boarding home, but something struck me. This time, the person behind the door was a little boy, about 6 years old, smiling at the meal that I handed him. His mother thanked me as she sat on the bed they shared in that tiny, dark room. I couldn't stop thinking about how different that little boy's Christmas must be compared to the experience that I had as a child. And I wondered how this disadvantage would affect that boy's future. So I finally faced the problem: inequality. We all say, in the United States, equality of opportunity allows anyone to succeed, regardless of the circumstances into which they were born. This is a strong belief held by the majority of Americans, and this ideology drives public policy. But when I look at the apparent inequality in this country, I realize that this belief does not reflect reality. This illusion of the American dream fails to acknowledge the reality that inequality has a powerful impact on people. Scientific data and research shows evidence of the detrimental effects that inequality has on the lives of people in the United States and around the world. But our country has a difficult time acknowledging this truth. Why do we so often disregard the inequality around us when we live in a country that claims to believe in equal opportunity for all? This might explain why. A study found that people evaluate scientific evidence based on its policy implications. So if the proposed solution to a problem isn't politically desirable, people tend to deny that the problem even exists. This is called solution aversion. The more threatening a solution is to you and I, the more likely we are to deny the problem. We live in a solution aversion bubble, and the only way to burst through this bubble is to face the problem in front of us. This means we must look beyond social norms and ideologically driven beliefs because we cannot allow opinion to triumph over scientific data. There are many forms of inequality, so let's face these problems together. Shedding light on our reality, research shows that inequality directly affects the brain. Inequality actually influences childhood learning development, starting at a young age. Let's face income inequality. Low-income children must activate more frontal cortex to achieve equivalent brain regulation as high-income children. And by age 5, the lower a child's socioeconomic status, the more reactive their stress response is. This results in poorer brain function associated with memory, impulse control, emotion regulation, and decision-making. So it's not just psychological, it's biological too. Considering the 40% of American children that live in low-income families, this evidence shows the significant disadvantage that poorer children must endure. Unequal opportunity is harming children's future success and economic stability. But the United States continues to lack effective efforts to reduce disparities in resources between wealthy and poor children. The socioeconomic gap between children's achievement in the United States is significantly larger compared to the United Kingdom, which has similar inequalities but provides more support for low-income families through universal health insurance and preschool. In the United States, schools generally base enrollment on economic segregation, causing low-income children to attend schools with fewer resources and poorer quality of education. Children's access to educational resources remains heavily dependent on their parents' income, which amplifies inequality and allows it to transcend to future generations. Now let's face the power of societal inequality. I want you all to imagine that you're boarding a plane. You check your ticket and walk towards the plane surrounded by other airline passengers, some wearing fancy suits and shiny watches, others wearing t-shirts and sneakers. You walk through the plane and find a seat next to a coach passenger. Now, if that plane has a first-class section, it's almost 4 times more likely that the coach passenger sitting next to you will express disruptive rage during the flight. And if that coach passenger walked through first class while boarding, the likelihood doubles. Research revealed this phenomenon. Reminders of social hierarchy and lower socioeconomic status cause people to express aggression, a psychological response to reduce stress. As Richard Wilkinson says, it's not so much that poverty predicts poor health, it's poverty amid plenty, inequality. Research shows that inequality serves as an indicator of social status, forging a social divide based on competition and class. Inequality indicates less social trust and cooperation, separating the higher class from contributing to the public good. A society with increased social hierarchy cultivates high stress and social anxiety for individuals in the lower socioeconomic class. Feelings of relative deprivation and low self-worth increases mental illness, displaced aggression, and resentment. Poorer children are more likely to feel deprived of respect, which increases their displays of violence and poor educational performance. This isn't just in the United States. It's a global phenomenon. A study demonstrated that when children in rural India were unaware of their class differences, the children from the high and low socioeconomic classes performed equally well in solving a series of puzzles. But when the children were made aware of their class differences, the performance of the children in the lower socioeconomic class was substantially reduced. This is scientific evidence of the truth about inequality. Yet we don't acknowledge it enough to make proper changes that truly reflect equal opportunity for all. We don't recognize our own self-serving dogmas because they're hidden in plain sight. So let's face gender inequality. Worldwide, the data is astounding. 1 in 3 women in the world have experienced sexual or physical violence in their lifetime. And for college students, or for college women in the United States, more than 90% of victims do not report being sexually assaulted. But when they do report it, sometimes we still don't face the problem. Even this university has turned a blind eye towards this issue. In 2013, a college student reported being sexually assaulted, and video surveillance provided evidence of her truth. But a university official told her that the man who assaulted her was not a threat. She was told that the university couldn't investigate the assault because it happened off campus. The university officials were told in 2013 that they violated Title IX policy, but they didn't tell her or even admit it until 2018, nearly 5 years later. He makes me feel very uncomfortable, disrespected, and I fear for my safety, she said. She even considered transferring to a different school. Can you imagine how this impacted her educational experience? How can society combat inequality if there's evidence that our political system and institutions refuse to see gender inequality as a serious problem? Our denial and refusal to recognize the injustice against women creates an even stronger cultural legacy of inequality. That's why it's so crucial that we have equal representation in our politics. Women make up 51% of the population, yet only 20% of government. But I know that society can grow and move to higher peaks because we've done it before. I witnessed it when I was 12 years old at Barack Obama's inauguration. And this letter that my father wrote when we saw Obama become president gives me hope that society can grow again.
Dear Sierra, since the November 4th, 2008 election, I've heard many people say that they never thought they'd live to see the day an African American became president. I was raised by a man who held the same belief, and his prediction was accurate. My father died before Barack Obama even became a senator, but he deserved to see the day because he was among the first people to recognize and reject the long legacy of inequality. And he believed that a person of any color or class should have the opportunity to reach their aspirations. I was born in the Midwest, before civil rights, in a time and a place where racism was a cultural norm. Sometime between then and now, there was a paradigm shift. It didn't happen overnight, and it couldn't have happened without a few among the reigning majority who found the courage to critically examine self-serving assumptions and reject an inheritance of racial supremacy. My father was a simple man who respected and embraced a simple truth. He was part of that initial groundswell that rejected the profitable dogmas of the past. He was the humble substance of internal change that was initially uninvited and unwelcomed by the white majority. That long journey toward change will reach a summit on January 20th, 2009, before moving on to higher peaks to be climbed by a newer, freer generation. My father did not live to see this great day in a land of promise. He'd have been so proud. I'm here to take his place as witness, along with his 12-year-old granddaughter, who will inherit a country that is more united, freer, and empowered to build a new world with yet untold accomplishments on a day that I may never live to see. With love and sincerity, your father.
There will come a day when I write a letter similar to this one. But I hope society won't be hindered by the denial of inequality. I hope our country will believe in an equally representative democracy so my father can live to see the day a woman becomes president in our country. Most of all, I hope we can understand how important it is to acknowledge the truth so we can live in a country that truly fosters equal opportunity for all. So we must ask ourselves, are we living in a solution aversion bubble? If we want to burst through this bubble, we must be brave enough to face the problem because we may live to see society grow and equal opportunity transcend to future generations. We may live to witness a monumental moment in history that brings forth a more united, freer, and empowered world. So be brave. Thank you.